Mr. Kotak, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So as the disability and mental health crisis is very prominent among the indigenous people, why is that?
Right, so when we talk about indigenous population, we're referring to actually three groups of people. We have First Nation, we have Inuit, and Métis. And much of the disability revolves around mental health, and there are physical issues too, but a lot of it is mental health related issues. One of the principal causes is what's called intergenerational trauma. When a child growing up experiences separation from parents, taken away in sort of an abusive format, so put in residential schools, for example, where there's significant mistreatment, this affects the actual development of the child's brain. And it impacts them going into adulthood. And not only that, it actually passes on this trauma. It's been proven actually goes to the next generation, and we get a repetitive cycle of anxiety, depression, and other forms of mental health related disability. And unfortunately, this is really one of the principal cause for our indigenous population having a much higher disability rate than the rest of the population of our country. In fact, it's about 1 in 3 indigenous persons will have a disability.
So the access to doctors or the medical treatment or the disability benefits a challenge for indigenous people?
Yes, there's a number of reasons for this. First, you could call it structural. And that is a lot of the indigenous population is living in more northern areas or remote areas. And we know the access to healthcare professionals is very limited in those areas. So that's one cause, it's just the geography. But the second one is also, I would say, stigma related. You see, many cultures overall and society at large still looks at mental health as one they don't want to talk about because it's the fear of looking weak, for example. We might see that in the South Asian community as well. Yes. But in the indigenous population, it's quite significant. There's a real stigma to acknowledging you're having a form of mental health crisis. And of course, if you're unwilling to acknowledge that, then you won't seek treatment. So that's one cause. The next one is, I would say, is mistrust of our healthcare system.
Okay.
Historically, indigenous people have been mistreated by our healthcare system. Their concerns have been dismissed, and it's actual sometimes outright abuse. So, you develop that generational mistrust. There's less willingness, even if there's availability of treatment, there's a less willingness to subject themselves to, the sort of the Western medical treatment because they feel that they're going to be abused, they're going to be laughed at, they're not going to be treated properly. So these are I would say, three principal factors that we see for inadequate treatment, particularly for mental illness when it comes to our indigenous population. Geography, the stigma attached to mental health, and the mistrust of the healthcare system.
Okay. Mr. Kotak, what are the doctors' role in disability claims for indigenous people?
So doctors play an important role in disability claims regardless of who the person is. They complete what's called a physician statement. And I'm talking specifically whether it's long-term disability, short-term disability, or CPP disability, for example, and even ODSP as well. There's always a physician statement. In that physician statement, the question for the doctor is, okay, what's the diagnosis? Yeah. But they also ask what the treatment is. And, if you're dealing with an indigenous person who hasn't got the treatment that normally you would expect to see for someone with mental illness, I think it's important for the doctor to explain why in the physician's statement. And that may well be, look, this person has been subjected to really intergenerational trauma, and this will it has made it more difficult for them to seek the treatment that we would expect. You see, and I think physicians do realize it, but when that's put in a physician statement, it allows the insurance company to look at that and not make arbitrary decisions, terminating claims or ending claims because of treatment-related issues.
So is Kotak Law represent clients across Canada or only Ontario?
Yeah. So we actually have offices in Alberta as well, Calgary, and Edmonton, throughout Ontario. So most of our clients are in Ontario and Alberta, but we do represent throughout the country. We have clients from British Columbia all the way to Newfoundland. We don't represent clients from Quebec because they work in the civil law. It's sort of the old French law, Napoleon French law, as opposed to the common law that we do. But every other province, for sure, we do have clients there.
Mr. Kotak, because Canada observes the Truth and Reconciliation Day every year, that's a national day.
Yes.
And why it is important to talk about disability on this day, and because we have heard about the Indian residential schools, and that trauma also passed from generations to generation. Is that also one of the cause for disability and mental stress among Indigenous people?
Yeah, you've asked a few questions there, 100%. It definitely is. The residential schools is a cause of intergenerational disability. Can you imagine being forcibly taken away from your culture, from your family, being forced not to speak your language that you were born with? So obviously, and having physical trauma as well. So obviously there was abuse. And that's affected that not only those who were taken away and sent to those residential schools, but their children as well, and their grandchildren. So that's sort of the answer to to sort of the main question that yes, of course, that residential schools has. I would also say this: you mentioned Truth and Reconciliation Day. We need to not make this focus. Okay, this is one day where we remember everything and try to fix things. Okay. This is a systemic problem that where there are issues that need to be thought about all the time. When we're dealing with an Indigenous population, we need to think about the past, think about constructive solutions, and don't just reflect on it for one. It's good we have a holiday for this, but I think it's important to reflect on these issues on a constant basis, not just for one day.
So what do you want to see from the federal government to address the mental health disability issues among the Indigenous people?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One is providing more resource, providing more having, encouraging therapists, doctors to go to areas where they in fact reside. And also being open and willing to fund, traditional healing that Indigenous population may prefer, whether it be community-based and from their own spiritual heritage as well, because they may actually be more willing to open up and participate in that more. So I think it's a willingness to engage in their own traditional healing methods. In addition to providing resource, obviously, physicians and psychologists and psychiatrists that we know we have an issue of scarcity, but being able to somehow provide that to them on a more readily basis.
Okay. Mr. Kotak, if someone's disability claim is declined, how can Kotak law helps them?
Right. So look, that's our principal area of practice is litigating long-term disability and short-term disability claim denials. What we do, contact us, we review the decision. A free consultation. Our intake clerk will look at that and speak to them, get the details. One of the lawyers will speak to the person. And what we do for cases, we charge fees based on a contingency fee. So there's no financial risk for the client. We sue the offending insurance company. And we sue them really quickly because we know the person is sitting without money, right? So and then we try to engage in discussions about getting them on claim or getting a lump sum settlement. And we do this by gathering medical evidence, getting medical legal opinions, and by engaging in settlement conferences and mediations to get their people's cases resolved in an expeditious manner.
So mental health, mental stress, and mental disability, is that really a challenge, really a big issue among Canadians nowadays?
100% it is. The old statistics were 1 in 5 Canadians at some point in their life will undergo a mental health challenge. It probably is more now post-pandemic. It really is. Most of the disability claims, in fact, we see are either solely based on mental health, or if the person is in so much chronic pain, it results in anxiety and depression. So there'll be a combination of physical and mental health related issues. It's very prevalent. There is more recognition in our society. Once we see celebrities go through mental health challenges, then people say, okay, I can come out and talk about it as well. But I bet you all of us know people. Anyone listening here, watching, knows somebody who right now is going through a mental health challenge. We all do, and it's important to be there to try to support each other, but also to understand, these claims, mental health related claims, are easy for insurance companies to deny because it's not like you have an X-ray, MRI, CT scan that's going to show, well, this is if you have a broken arm or something, you can see it. Here you can't. So it's based on subjective, which means the person's actual complaints to their doctor. And it's very easy for insurance companies to say, well, there's insufficient medical evidence, you're not getting enough treatment, et cetera, et cetera. But we have a very good success record in fighting these types of denials through our experience.
Mr. Kotak, thank you very much for this all information.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. आज के Nainesh Kotak, founder of Kotak Personal Injury Law. अगर थोड़ा disability claim deny हो गया है ਜਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਡਿਸੇਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਕਲੇਮ ਬੰਦ ਹੈ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਐਡਵਾਈਸ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, ਤੇ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਤੇ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਨੰਬਰਸ ਤੇ ਕੋਟਕ ਲਾਅ ਨੂੰ ਰੀਚ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ।